When we talk about dreams and prayers as means to unlock God's power, it's important to first understand the nature of the connection they create between us and the divine. At their core, both dreams and prayers serve as channels of communication bridges, if you will, between our human experience and God's infinite presence. This connection isn't just spiritual fluff or poetic metaphor. It reflects a profound psychological and philosophical reality about how humans interact with the sacred and how divine power is accessed in our lives. Think about prayer first. Prayer is often seen as simply asking God for help or giving thanks, but it's far more than that. Psychologically, prayer functions as a focused, intentional dialogue with the divine. When we pray, we're not only speaking outwardly, but also turning inward, engaging our deepest thoughts, emotions, and desires with a higher consciousness. This inward focus quiets the distractions of daily life, allowing us to tune into something beyond ourselves, a transcendent intelligence or presence that guides, heals, and empowers. Philosophically, prayer acknowledges our dependence on a power greater than our own, which is both humbling and liberating. It shifts us from the illusion of control to a posture of trust and openness, a readiness to receive what God offers. Now, dreams might seem more mysterious, even elusive, but they serve a complementary role in this divine communication. From a psychological perspective, dreams are the mind's way of processing subconscious information, fears, hopes, unresolved conflicts. But in a spiritual context, they also act as a sacred language through which God can speak directly to us. This idea is ancient and cross-cultural, seen in scriptures and spiritual traditions worldwide. Dreams bypass our rational mind, tapping into symbolic, metaphorical imagery that can reveal truths we might miss in waking consciousness. Philosophically, dreams represent the intersection between the finite human and the infinite divine, a liminal space where insight and revelation emerge. They challenge us to decode and discern, fostering a dynamic relationship with God that requires attentiveness and faith. What's powerful about this connection created by dreams and prayers is that it doesn't just passively transmit information or requests. It actively transforms us. When we engage in prayer, we're not just petitioning for change in the external world. We're inviting transformation within ourselves of our perspective, our will, and our capacity to receive God's power. Similarly, when a dream touches us deeply, it often initiates a process of reflection and growth, compelling us to act or change in alignment with divine purpose. This internal transformation is essential because God's power, as revealed through dreams and prayers, often works through us, not merely for us. It's also worth noting that the connection we create through these practices is inherently relational. God's power is not a static force to be harnessed like a tool. It's a living presence that responds to our openness, sincerity, and faith. Dreams and prayers invite us into a relationship where listening and responding are as important as speaking or receiving. In this relational dynamic, the power we access is not merely about miraculous interventions, but about ongoing guidance, strength, and wisdom that shape our daily lives. Understanding this connection also helps us move beyond simplistic ideas that God's power is automatic or mechanical. It's not a vending machine where you insert a prayer or a dream and instantly get what you want. Rather, it's a complex, dynamic interplay involving our mind, spirit, and heart. It requires patience, discernment, and above all, faith that God is present and active, even when we don't immediately see the results. So, when you next engage in prayer or wake from a vivid dream, Remember that these are sacred moments where you're opening a gateway to divine power. They're opportunities to connect deeply with God's presence and invite transformation, not only in your circumstances, but within your very being. This connection, built on trust, openness, and the willingness to listen, is the foundation on which all spiritual breakthroughs are built. Ultimately, the power of God that dreams and prayers unlock is not distant or abstract. It is alive, accessible, and ready to move in our lives when we step into this sacred dialogue with intention and faith. The question isn't whether God can act, but whether we are willing to listen and respond. So I leave you with this. The divine connection made through your prayers and dreams is the most powerful key you hold, one that invites you not just to receive God's power, but to become a vessel for it in the world. How will you open that door today? When we talk about dreams as messages from God, it's essential to appreciate the profound role they play in revealing divine intention and guiding our journey. Dreams are not random flickers of images or mere echoes of our daily experiences. They carry a deeper significance that bridges the psychological with the spiritual, inviting us into a realm where God's voice becomes audible in the language of symbols, emotions, and metaphor. From a psychological perspective, dreams serve as a kind of inner theater where the subconscious mind presents its narratives. But what happens when we understand these narratives as more than just personal reflections? When we open ourselves to the possibility that God speaks through dreams, we enter a profound dialogue that transcends our usual modes of understanding. Dreams then become a sacred medium, a way for divine wisdom to bypass the filters of logic and ego and reach the core of our being. They often convey what our conscious mind cannot grasp, directly insights about our purpose, warnings about potential pitfalls, or encouragement to take a bold step of faith. Philosophically, this process invites us to reconsider the nature of reality itself. If God uses dreams as a language to communicate, it suggests that the boundaries between the physical world and the spiritual realm are more porous than we often assume. Dreams, in this light, become liminal spaces, thresholds where the finite meets the infinite, where time and space fold in on themselves to allow moments of revelation. This challenges the modern tendency to dismiss dreams as mere biological byproducts or meaningless neural noise. Instead, it encourages a more integrated view of human experience, where spiritual truths can manifest within the psychological processes of dreaming. What's striking is how dreams often come loaded with symbolism. Unlike direct instructions, these symbols require interpretation, a decoding that engages our intellect, intuition, and faith simultaneously. This interpretative act itself is a form of spiritual exercise. It trains us to listen carefully, to be patient with ambiguity, and to cultivate discernment. We learn that the divine does not always speak in straightforward sentences, but in poetic imagery, inviting us to move beyond surface understanding into deeper wisdom. Moreover, God's use of dreams reflects a dynamic and personal relationship. Dreams are not one-size-fits-all messages. They are tailored to our unique contexts, struggles, and spiritual maturity. This personalization underscores that God's power is not distant or impersonal, but intimately involved in the details of our lives. Each dream is like a bespoke message, crafted to meet us where we are and nudge us forward on our journey. This dynamic reminds us that divine communication respects our freedom and invites collaboration. It beckons us to engage actively, interpret thoughtfully, and respond courageously. There's also a crucial element of timing in the way dreams function as divine messages. Often a dream's significance unfolds gradually, revealing layers of meaning as we grow or as circumstances change. This temporal dimension encourages us to hold onto these dreams with reverence and openness, rather than rushing to dismiss them or forcing immediate action. The power unlocked through these dreams is thus intertwined with patience and faith, waiting for the right moment to act, trusting that God's timing is perfect even when it challenges our impatience. In biblical narratives and throughout spiritual traditions, dreams have been pivotal in shaping destinies. Joseph's prophetic dreams in Egypt, Daniel's interpretations in Babylon, or Jacob's vision of the ladder to heaven. These stories remind us that dreams are not just personal experiences, but part of a larger divine economy where God's power is revealed to individuals who listen and act. The lesson is clear. When we recognize dreams as potential divine messages, we open ourselves to a source of wisdom that can unlock breakthroughs, provide clarity in confusion, and empower us to live out our God-given purpose. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that when you next awaken from a dream that lingers in your mind, don't dismiss it as random or trivial. Instead, pause and ask, what is God trying to communicate here? How might this dream be an invitation to greater faith, insight, or action? By embracing dreams as more than subconscious noise, we reclaim a powerful spiritual tool, a language through which God's power can touch our hearts and transform our lives. Remember, the power of a dream lies not simply in its occurrence, but in our willingness to receive and respond. Dreams are God's way of speaking into the quiet spaces of our lives, offering guidance when words fail and illuminating paths we cannot yet see. If we cultivate the humility and openness to listen, we unlock a divine wisdom that moves us beyond fear and doubt toward hope and purpose. In the end, the question is this: will you be attentive enough to hear God's voice when it comes softly in your dreams, and brave enough to follow where it leads? Because in that moment of response lies the true unlocking of God's power. When we consider the transformative power of prayer, it's essential to recognize that prayer is far more than a ritual or a simple exchange of words. It is a profound practice that reshapes our inner world, and by extension unlocks God's power in ways that are both deeply personal and universally significant. At its heart, prayer is a dynamic process of alignment, an intentional act that draws our finite, often fragmented selves into harmony with the infinite and unified presence of God. Psychologically, prayer serves as a bridge between our conscious and unconscious minds. In the quiet moments of prayer, our restless thoughts begin to settle, and the noise of our everyday anxieties fades. This creates a mental and emotional space where clarity can emerge, a clarity born not merely of our own reasoning, but from a deeper source of wisdom. Prayer cultivates a focused attention that trains us to move beyond reactive thinking and emotional turmoil toward a state of receptive openness. This openness is crucial because it allows the presence of God to enter into the gaps of our understanding, offering insight, comfort, and strength that transcends our usual capacities. Philosophically, prayer invites us into a posture of surrender, not defeat, but a conscious relinquishing of control. In a world that prizes self, sufficiency, and mastery, this surrender can feel counterintuitive or even risky. Yet it is precisely this act of yielding that opens the door to divine power. When we acknowledge our limitations and invite God's influence, we create a space where transformation becomes possible. Prayer is not about coercing God to act according to our wishes. It's about aligning our will with God's purpose, which is often far wiser and more expansive than we realize. This alignment doesn't diminish our agency. Rather, it empowers us by connecting us to a source of strength that surpasses human effort. This transformative potential of prayer is visible in the way it shapes character and perception. Regular prayer refines our ability to discern what truly matters, shifting our focus from external outcomes to internal growth. It deepens our empathy, cultivates patience, and nurtures hope, even in the face of adversity. Through prayer, we become more attuned to the presence of God in everyday life, recognizing moments of grace and guidance that might otherwise go unnoticed. This attunement itself is a form of empowerment because it changes how we experience reality. We begin to see obstacles as opportunities and challenges as invitations to trust more deeply. Moreover, prayer acts as a catalyst for community and connection. Though often practiced privately, prayer is fundamentally relational. It connects us not only to God, but also to others. Shared prayer cultivates a collective faith and amplifies the experience of divine power through communal intention. This collective aspect is important because God's power is not limited to individual lives. It is a force that moves within relationships, communities, and even societies. Through prayer, we participate in a larger spiritual ecosystem where transformation and healing can ripple outward, creating change beyond ourselves. It's also critical to understand that prayer is an ongoing journey rather than a one-time event. The power unlocked through prayer unfolds gradually, often requiring perseverance and trust. There will be times when prayer feels unanswered or distant, yet these moments are part of the deeper work of spiritual maturation. Faith grows not simply by receiving immediate results, but by holding on to hope in uncertainty and remaining open to God's timing and wisdom. This patient endurance is itself a sign of prayer's transformative effect. In many ways, prayer is an invitation to co-create with God. It's a participatory process where human vulnerability meets divine strength. We bring our needs, our hopes, and our gratitude, and in return, we receive the guidance, power, and peace necessary to navigate life's complexities. This mutual exchange is the essence of how prayer unlocks God's power. Not by demanding, but by inviting, not by controlling, but by yielding, and not by isolating, but by connecting. So, as you consider your own prayer life, ask yourself, how might prayer be shaping you from the inside out? How might it be opening your heart and mind to God's power in ways you have yet to fully recognize? The transformative power of prayer is not a distant promise. It is available here and now, waiting to move through your willingness to seek, listen, and align. Remember, prayer is not just about speaking to God. It's about letting God speak to you. And in that sacred dialogue, the true unlocking of divine power occurs. When we explore the idea of faith and expectation as keys to unlocking God's power, we're delving into one of the most profound dynamics of spiritual life. It's not enough to simply dream or pray. There must be an inner posture, a deep, seated trust combined with a confident anticipation that opens the door wide for God's power to move. Psychologically, faith is more than blind hope. It is a conscious stance of the mind and heart that influences how we perceive reality and interact with the world around us. Faith, at its core, rewires our mental framework. Neuroscience suggests that what we expect shapes our attention, perception, and even our emotional responses. When we approach prayer and dreams with genuine faith, we're essentially training our brain to be alert for divine possibilities, to notice subtle signs, and to interpret experiences through a lens of hope and trust. This is not magical thinking, but an evidence-based recognition that our beliefs influence our experience of reality. Philosophically, faith bridges the seen and unseen, the known and the mysterious, creating a space where divine power can operate. Expectation works hand in hand with faith. To expect something is to place oneself in a state of readiness, psychologically prepared to receive and respond. It's a forward-looking posture that shifts us from passivity into engagement. When we expect God's power to be present and active, we become participants rather than spectators in the spiritual journey. This expectancy motivates us to remain vigilant, to keep praying, to pay attention to dreams, and to take steps even when the outcome is uncertain. But expectation rooted in faith is not naive optimism. It's a sophisticated stance that acknowledges the complexities of life and the realities of delay, difficulty, and even apparent silence. This kind of expectation is paradoxical. It holds firmly to hope while embracing uncertainty. This tension is crucial because it cultivates resilience and patience, qualities necessary for the unfolding of God's power. Philosophically, this tension invites us into a dynamic relationship with the divine, one marked by trust rather than demand, by openness rather than control. Faith and expectation also transform how we engage with prayer and dreams themselves. Instead of approaching these spiritual practices as mere routines or rituals, faith encourages us to see them as living encounters with God's presence. Expectation invites us to look beyond the immediate and the obvious, to discern the hidden movements of divine power that may be subtle or gradual. This shift in perspective often leads to a deepening of spiritual insight and a readiness to act on the promptings we receive. The historical and scriptural witness affirms the power of faith and expectation. Countless stories from spiritual traditions show that breakthroughs often come not simply through actions or ceremonies, but through the faith-filled readiness to receive what God is doing. Whether it's the faith of a woman who touches Jesus' garment and is healed, or the expectant prayers of those awaiting divine intervention, these narratives highlight that faith opens the channel through which God's power flows. This interplay of faith and expectation also impacts how we interpret the messages in our dreams and prayers. When we hold these experiences with faith, we are less likely to dismiss them as coincidence or wishful thinking. Instead, we approach them with reverence and curiosity, recognizing them as potential sparks of divine communication. Expectation keeps us engaged in the process of discernment, encouraging us to explore and act on the insights we receive, even when the path forward is unclear. In practical terms, cultivating faith and expectation means nurturing a mindset and heart posture that are receptive and responsive. It involves practicing trust daily, even when circumstances seem to contradict hope. It means staying committed to prayer and attentive to dreams, believing that God's power is present and active even when unseen. It calls for courage to step forward in faith, to act on the quiet nudges from God, and to remain steadfast when answers don't come on our timeline. Ultimately, faith and expectation are not just abstract concepts, but living realities that transform how we experience God's power. They shift us from passivity to participation, from doubt to trust, and from isolation to relationship. When we embrace these qualities, we position ourselves to receive and embody the power that God longs to unleash in and through us. So, as you reflect on your own spiritual journey, consider this. How might deepening your faith and expectation open new doors for God's power in your life? What might it look like to move forward with confident trust, ready to receive and respond? Because in that posture, the miraculous begins to unfold not as distant possibility, but as present reality. When we consider the testimonies of God's power unleashed through dreams and prayers, we enter into a living tradition that spans cultures, centuries, and individual lives. These stories are not simply inspiring anecdotes. They provide profound psychological and philosophical insights into how divine power operates in human experience. They reveal a pattern that when individuals open themselves to God through dreams and prayers, transformative breakthroughs follow. Breakthroughs that reshape not only circumstances, but also the very fabric of a person's being. Psychologically, testimonies illustrate the power of narrative in shaping our reality. When someone shares how a prayer was answered or how a dream unlocked a path forward, they are recounting moments where the unseen became tangible and hope overcame despair. These stories reinforce the truth that faith is not abstract. It is embodied in lived experience. Hearing such testimonies activates our own imagination and belief systems, making the possibility of divine intervention more accessible to us. They serve as psychological anchors, reminding us that what may seem improbable is within reach when God's power is invited into the process. Philosophically, these testimonies confront us with the reality that human experience is not confined to the material or the measurable. They challenge the reductionist world, you that dismisses spiritual phenomena as mere superstition or coincidence. Instead, they invite us to consider that there is an active, intelligent force that intersects with our lives, one that can communicate through dreams, respond to prayers, and orchestrate outcomes beyond human control. This recognition expands our understanding of existence, inviting a holistic view that includes both the visible and invisible dimensions of life. Take, for example, the biblical story of Joseph. His prophetic dreams were initially met with disbelief and even hostility, yet those dreams were the instruments through which God's power unfolded dramatically. Joseph's ability to interpret dreams not only saved nations from famine, but also transformed his own journey from prisoner to ruler. This narrative highlights how dreams serve as divine blueprints, visions of possibility that guide us through hardship toward destiny. The psychological depth here lies in Joseph's perseverance and faith despite adversity, showing how belief in God's messages can sustain and empower even in the darkest times. Similarly, countless testimonies from contemporary life echo this pattern. People who have wrestled with personal crises, health challenges, or impossible circumstances often recount moments when a dream or a prayer changed everything. These experiences are often accompanied by a heightened sense of meaning and purpose, a realization that their lives are part of a larger, divinely orchestrated story. Psychologically, this can lead to post-traumatic growth, where suffering becomes a catalyst for spiritual awakening and resilience. Philosophically, it reinforces the concept that God's power is not random but intentional, working through human vulnerability to bring about redemption and healing. What makes these testimonies particularly powerful is their relational dimension. They remind us that God's power is not isolated magic but relational force, a dynamic that unfolds within a web of trust, obedience, and openness. When people respond to God's invitations through prayer or heed the guidance of a dream, they participate in a co-creative process. This cooperation with the divine invites God's power to flow in ways that exceed human expectation. It underscores a profound truth. Divine power often manifests in partnership with human faith and action. Moreover, these stories challenge us to reconsider how we approach our own dreams and prayers. They invite us to be courageous in sharing our experiences and attentive to the ways God may be working in our lives. The testimonies become a communal reservoir of hope and wisdom, encouraging us to recognize and trust the signs, messages, and answers that emerge. They teach us that no experience of God's power is too small or insignificant. Every answered prayer and meaningful dream is a thread in the tapestry of divine activity. In reflecting on these testimonies, we are called to move beyond passive belief toward active participation. We are invited to cultivate a faith that is not merely theoretical but practiced, one that expects God's power to break through in our own stories. This means embracing both the mystery and the discipline of spiritual life, praying with intention, reflecting on our dreams, and stepping forward in faith even when the path is unclear. So, as you listen to these stories and consider the power of dreams and prayers in your own life, ask yourself, how might your testimony be a gateway for others to experience God's power? What steps can you take today to engage more deeply with the divine dialogue through dreams and prayers? Because in sharing and living these experiences, we become vessels through which God's power continues to flow and transform the world. When we speak about living in alignment with God's purpose, it becomes clear that this is not a passive state, but an active, ongoing process that is deeply connected to the power unlocked through dreams and prayers. This alignment is the spiritual harmony where our inner desires, intentions, and actions resonate with the divine will, creating a flow of energy and purpose that transforms both our lives and the world around us. From a psychological perspective, living in alignment with God's purpose addresses a fundamental human need for meaning and coherence. When our dreams and prayers are aligned with that higher purpose, they serve as guides, not random or arbitrary signals, but intentional beacons illuminating the path ahead. This alignment creates what psychologists call self-congruence, a state where our inner values and outer actions are synchronized, leading to greater psychological well-being, resilience, and clarity. It reduces the inner conflict that arises when we pursue goals disconnected from our deeper truth, enabling us to move forward with conviction and peace. Philosophically, the idea of alignment with God's purpose invites us to consider the nature of free will and divine sovereignty. It suggests that true freedom is not merely doing whatever we desire, but choosing to co-create with a higher intelligence that knows the ultimate good for us and for the whole. This co-creation requires humility and discernment, the willingness to listen attentively through prayer and to interpret the language of dreams with openness. It means recognizing that our individual purpose is nested within a greater cosmic order, a purpose that often transcends our immediate understanding, but calls us to trust and act nonetheless. Living in alignment also transforms the way we approach challenges and setbacks. When our actions and intentions are rooted in divine purpose, obstacles become less like random misfortunes and more like essential parts of a journey that refines and strengthens us. This shift in perspective encourages perseverance and hope, even in difficult times. Psychologically, this is a powerful mechanism for sustaining motivation and meaning, as it transforms suffering into a process of growth and spiritual maturation. Furthermore, this alignment encourages ethical living and integrity. When we are attuned to God's purpose, our decisions naturally reflect values such as compassion, justice, and humility. This creates a ripple effect, influencing not only our personal lives but also our communities and environments. The power unlocked through dreams and prayers is thus not an isolated experience, but a force for positive transformation that radiates outward. It shapes how we relate to others, how we contribute to society, and how we steward the world. The process of living in alignment is dynamic and requires ongoing commitment. It's not a one-time revelation, but a continuous dialogue, a cycle of praying, dreaming, discerning, and acting. This cycle fosters spiritual maturity, deepening our capacity to recognize God's voice and to respond faithfully. It also teaches patience, as alignment often unfolds over time rather than instantaneously. This ongoing engagement keeps us connected to divine power, sustaining our momentum and vision. In the stories of spiritual figures and everyday believers alike, we see that alignment with God's purpose is what ultimately unlocks the fullest expression of divine power. When Joseph embraced the dreams God gave him, he lived out a purpose that brought salvation to many. When the early church prayed and acted in unity, they witnessed transformative miracles. These examples remind us that alignment is not an abstract ideal, but a lived reality with tangible outcomes. So, how do we cultivate this alignment? It begins with intentional prayer, seeking clarity and guidance, not for our own ambition, but for God's will. It involves paying close attention to dreams, treating them as potential roadmaps rather than mere curiosities. It calls for a posture of humility, openness, and courage, trusting that even when the path is unclear, we are being led towards something greater. In closing, consider this. The power of dreams and prayers is not fully realized until it moves us into alignment with God's purpose. When that happens, the divine energy flows through us with greater freedom and effectiveness, transforming our lives and the world. The invitation is clear. Will you choose to live intentionally in this alignment, embracing the dialogue of dreams and prayers, and stepping boldly into the purpose God has for you? Because in that choice lies the true unlocking of God's power.